but I wanted to introduce first Josh Harrison. He's the Director of Learning and Performance. He's working with an agency called Design Dynamics, and he works with many other companies to design and develop training, instruction, and performance supports that support other companies' efforts for workplace development and training. One thing I wanted to mention about Josh is that I met him because he offered to be an internship host for us. And so he's worked with a number of our students who've gone on to do amazing things. And I've always enjoyed talking to him about the process and the learning and his that he's gained over the years. And he does represent kind of as, first kind of like a more kind of experienced senior management level position. So when you think about a career pathway, you think about what you might do right when you graduate, but you should also be thinking about what you might be doing in 10 or 20 years. Gautami is also a person who works in learning and development at Audible. She's fairly recent to that particular job. She'll talk about that. Before that, she's worked as a learning designer in other companies. But Gautami is also DMDL alum, so write down questions if you want to know how her experiences in the program influenced her work. And also she happens to be a student that I knew when she was in the program because I was her internship placement host. So she was my intern when I worked in the private sector. So it all comes around small world. I'm going to turn this over to Manisha, who has a list of questions that her team came up with. And she may go slightly off script if needed, but and you guys should definitely, again, write down questions that you might have that don't get asked. And we'll make sure to leave like 20 minutes at the end, 15, 20 minutes for your questions.
Thank you, Micah, and welcome, Gautami and Josh. Thank you so much for coming and joining us tonight. So let's straight dive in to the questions. Josh, first to you. We heard great things about you, but we would like to hear it from you. Can you talk a little bit about what you do at Drury Design Dynamics?
Surely. Thank you for having me here. And first I want to say a very nice presentation from all three of you, and very good to see a lot of research, a lot of care and thought went into it, and I'm going to say it kind of doesn't really matter in the sense when you get out into the real world, because what you're going to discover is that it's important to have a foundation, but you're going to find I have a learning and performance group, entirely different combination of similar words, performance management, learning, training. You'll find lots of different things tend to overlap and mean the same thing. So I think the research is critical and important and good, but you also have to recognize the flexibility is what you've learned in school is at best a first pass at what you're going to experience when you go there. I'm a little bit further from some of the career paths that you work in, because I work in a company that basically supports other industries. So as such, we tend to do the things that are unusual. We tend to have the programs that aren't internally institutionalized within a corporate learning stream. So what does that mean? It means in the pharmaceutical business, which is a heavily regulated business, has a great deal of learning, and one of the major employment sectors for people in the learning business, because it is so heavily regulated and because every single word that a pharmaceutical salesperson says to a physician or to the general public, in principle, has been approved. Practice, that may not be true, but in principle, it's been pre-approved. So it's a very heavily, and if they make a mistake, they pay $1 billion in a fine. Pfizer has paid $4.5 billion in fines for having their salespeople say the wrong thing in the wrong place over time. J&J has paid almost as much. Every major pharmaceutical, so they're one of the places where they care about it. A lot of places you can say the wrong thing and it doesn't really matter, or here in this conversation we can make a mistake and it doesn't really matter. But there it does. So they have a very careful pathway. But where my company comes in is when they're doing something that's not standard, when they have a new product they have to launch, when they have an experience that they haven't fully programmed out in their curriculum design and instructional path. And so they come to a company like mine to say, we have this, it's not an unusual situation, it's a normal situation, but it's outside of their normal workflow. How can we do that? We have normally we train in our classrooms and people work on site and they go off and do visits. We're actually going to bring 2,500 people together in one spot, and we have 4 or 5 days, and we have to create an experience rich enough in those 4 or 5 days that they're going to come away with something. That's one kind of example. Another kind of thing that we do a lot of is, and where the performance comes in, is when people are in a position in a company and they want to change, they want to do a cultural change, they want to do a shift in behavior, they want to change the way processes work outside of their standard process, they come to companies like mine and say, we have a challenge. I do a, again, staying long enough ago that it's not tails out of school, again, and I'll stay within the pharmaceutical world. I was approached by, my company was approached by a company that no longer exists called Pharmacia, and a company that still exists called Pfizer, and they were sharing a product, and they didn't get along. They had different management structures, they had different sales structures, they had to do a co-venture. We actually ran what you can only call as a corporate marriage counseling service for them for about a year and a half, which we called the Cox2 is the name of the product, Cox2 Alliance. And so we brought in, and it was a very, very big deal. We had McKinsey, we had, it was a major, tens of millions of dollars were spent on this process, at the very least. And we went through, and we had to map, and we had to say who at Pfizer could speak to whom at Pharmacy, and why they could do it, and what had to go on. And we had to basically handle, we basically had to teach people how to behave with each other. And it worked for a while, and Pfizer decided they'd buy Pharmacy, and then it was done in the M&A merger of the 80s. So that's one other sort of thing. Another process that comes in the work that we do is a more recently, or a current project that I'm working on for IBM is they wanted to change the way their sales force approached their customers. IBM's a major company. They have 350,000 employees globally. They have one of the largest sales forces in the world. They have 24,000 people or active in sales, down from about 32,000 when we started the program, so you can see what direction that's going. But what they needed to do was they've been selling hardware and everything in terms of features and benefits. They needed to become a company that actually sold the value of their services. And it was a very different conversation that they had to have, and it was a very different conversation from what people in the company were used to. And that brings us to one other useful point. The United States is not a young country, it's an aging country, which means a lot of the work in technology that you're doing is geared towards younger people, but a lot of the workforce is not younger. So in fact, a lot of what you're training for is very appropriate for some people and completely misses the boat for other people. And that's why multiple learning styles, multiple flexibility, and an understanding that just because it's technology, it doesn't mean it will work, is pretty critical when you have a broader, larger company. A lot of the really innovative stuff can work in smaller companies that have more flexibility and more opportunities to experiment and try things and have a lot more freedom what they do. But if you have a workforce like IBM's, they're probably 60% of the people are over 40. And so things that work with short attention spans, things that work with micro-learning, or what we call snacks, bites, and meals, why not? That comes out of the food industry when we did a lot, where we put that together, has to be leavened with the real experience of who you are, who's your workforce, what do they need to do, and coming in with fixed ideas often is a recipe for not getting the results you want. Coming in and learning and listening, this is actually the specific lesson we're working with IBM about, is to listen first, not to present first. So listen, understand, do your research, do your discovery, really understand what you're trying to solve, what the problem, because the initial question you may be asked is not actually the one you need to solve. What you tend to hear when you come up may not in fact be what you actually have to do to resolve the issue and get people where they need to go. And with that, I'll let the conversation go.
Thank you. You're doing some amazing, you're involved in some really amazing projects. So
I haven't even begun to talk about the school boards and some of the other.
we would like to hear that too at some point. So Gautami, tell us something about yourself, what you do, and yeah.
So like Micah said, I'm an alum of the NYU DMDL program, and I graduated in 2012. And now I work at Audible as an instructional designer, and I started with the company only about 6 months ago. And before Audible, I was an instructional designer at Grovo. which is a company that does micro-learning videos, and they're said to have pioneered micro-learning in 2010. And a lot of what EunA said about like goldfish and attention spans is kind of like the marketing language that Grovo came up with, so that was familiar. But yeah, so in the last 7 years, I've been an instructional designer pretty much the whole time, only different titles, and also different industries. I started out with finance, and then cable, and then Grovo, which is a learning company, and now I guess I'm in audio entertainment. So
Wow, the program has really helped you. So tell us, how's your typical day like as an instructional designer? I mean, I'm curious, there are many in the room who would like to explore this. So what's an ideal day like?
um, so pretty much like any other job, like no 2 days are the same. So I'm going to maybe like give you a general breakdown of what I do. Um, about 2 or 3 hours in a day is in meetings, and this is on like a good work day, um, because when you're in training, you're kind of in the middle of a lot of things, and a lot of things need to come together for training, and especially for product launches, you kind of work with almost every function in the organization, starting from the product team to about the details of the launch, and then marketing based on like how they're marketing it to customers. And I primarily work with the customer care team, and sometimes with leadership and development. So I spend a lot of time on like, it could be status meetings, but it could also be like brainstorming and other meetings to like understand what needs to happen. And let's say I try to like carve out about 4 to 5 hours on just like creating stuff. And I work a lot with e-learning authoring tools. And I also produce the video-based learning in the company. So here at Audible, we have like a portfolio kind of structure where instructional designers own certain projects and they take it from start to finish. So I'm talking with subject matter experts for like needs analysis, scoping out the training, creating the outlines, developing the training, and then connecting it back to the data analysis team to like see how we did, what needs to be improved, what clicked and what didn't. And different projects are in different stages at each time, and I typically have about 3 to 4 projects at any given time. And other than that, I take an hour or two to spend with interns in the organization. We have high school interns and college interns who were expected to like mentor and like assign work and like um, just help them get through. So I spend some time with them during the day, but that's pretty much it.
That's a very busy day. Okay, Josh, you are a veteran in this industry, right? So can you tell us or give us an idea? Like, I know we've done our research, and I don't know. I want you to validate it. What are the different kind of roles that you see? I know the labels are different, but ideally, what kind of roles can a DMDL student look for when they graduate? What are the common roles that you see in the industry?
Well, I think that's a really important question, and again, I have a kind of insider-outsider view in terms of the industry, as I want to make clear. So that the people, so speaking for my company and the companies in the ecosystem that I live in, which is the support ecosystem, we do the work that companies can't do for themselves. So that means our work structure is different, and the people that we hire are not necessarily the same kinds of people. But some of the skills overlap, of course. So let me just start by saying that. So I tend to hire generalists who can learn applications. I tend to hire people with for me, the biggest and most important item on your list is project management. Because that's the piece that most corporations I work with fail at. It's no longer, and my particular theory on this is it's no longer a promotable skill inside a lot of corporate America because people stay in positions 18 months, 24 months maybe, and most large corporate projects take 2 to 3 years, which means you get promoted for starting a project, you maybe get promoted for finishing a project, but you don't get promoted for seeing a project from start to finish. you outsource that. And these are things that go through cycles. You know, years ago, corporations had newspapers inside. They did newsletters. Then they outsourced all of it, including their janitorial staff. Now they're beginning to bring, as technology makes multi-purpose simpler, they're bringing some of that back in, but they're also outsourced. So I look for people primarily who are smart, who have a lot of flexibility in what they can do, who can respond to different situations, who have a relatively calm voice in chaos, because corporate decisions are generally, when you're they're hard enough inside a company, but when you're outside a company, you have no control over the changes that will come your way. So you need to be prepared to do that. I look for people who can very quickly pick something up, because we have lots of different jobs. Some of them are long-term, some of them are short-term, but none of them you get a long learning curve. So I look for people for whom a learning curve is not a challenge, but something interesting and exciting, and something that can do that. The flip side of that is the work is varying, it's different. Some of it involves travel, some of it involves getting involved in companies in ways that you would never have. We can bring people in to the CEO level as easily as we bring people in lower middle management. Depends on the project. That particular one I mentioned went pretty high up in some multi-billion-dollar companies because they needed to do it. So from that point of view, from what the people I work with, my counterparts in business, the internal training groups, I think you've laid out some pretty accurate descriptions in terms of the people that on the other side of the conversation that I have. And I think that felt fairly accurate. So if that's helpful.
Great. Good to know that. Thank you. So I'll move on to Gautami now. Gautami, you've explained your day, and people like to know, do you face any? I mean, I'm sure you do face challenges, but would you like to share that with us? Like, if you come across any, and how you kind of tackle that?
So if I were to talk about challenges, and I'm going to talk about it at a really high level, from all my experience in different companies, just need to get prepared if you're thinking about a career as an instructional designer, to answer a lot of questions after you've done your work, and to defend your thinking and your design, because when anything doesn't happen, or if there is something that you want to see happen but it didn't, there is a lot going on. But training is the first thing that comes to mind. Did we train to this? Did we cover this in training? And training is the easiest thing to also do, and things might not be happening for many different reasons, but it is the easiest to put a finger on. So
You have a big target.
that's what I was saying. No, but it's
So you need thick skin.
yeah, thick skin, and also just training is not fix all. You're just addressing one of the many things, so you just need to have a strong logic for what you're doing, and also be prepared to talk about it. But that to me is sometimes challenging, because it's not about training in many different cases. So that's what I would say.
Thank you. Something to think, keep in mind. Okay, Josh, you spoke about roles. What about skills? What kind of skills do you look when you're hiring an instructional designer or anyone in general in this space?
The most important, for an instructional, again, let me talk about terminology in my world, which is a little bit different than the terminology here. For me, an instructional designer is an instructional writer. And then I have a curriculum designer or a program lead. Again, these are terminologies. What I look for in somebody who's designing a program is not only skill and experience in design, but experience in the industry, which I'm working with. Because I don't have a lot, again, as I mentioned, I'm working in projects. I don't have a onboarding experience. I can't say to my client, okay, we're going to do a 30-day onboarding experience while they understand your rules and your understanding, your thing, and then they'll be ready to help you. I need people who to build a solution from the moment we begin to start the concept. And building a solution can involve a lot of research. It doesn't mean they have to solve the problem, but they don't need that. I can't be in a position where people have to have a learning curve to get ready to help our customers. That's because, again, I'm not inside a company, I'm outside a company, and people come to me when they need a problem they can't solve easily inside. So at the highest levels, I need people with a great deal of experience. As a writer, I need a good writer. A good writer is someone who can take a lot of information and synthesize it quickly. Experience is always helpful, but less critical in a particular sector. Those are the two probably most important creative jobs. I mentioned the third job already, which is somebody who understands how to manage a program, how to get something go, how to organize people. So those three, production, writing, and design, are the three core skills. I do a lot of work with media. I do a lot of work in digital, and those, again, are mixed. Those are more flexible. But when you're building a program and when you're working with a team, you find, again, experience it's not a measurable, quantifiable value, but when you can set up a camera in 5 minutes once you come in versus setting up a camera in, sorry, I'm not trying to say anything like that, but that's the difference between a team that's well working, that's well run, that's set up when you're, so that's a value because there's a time value to money. It's also a time value to efficiency, and you want to be able to do things as well as you can. So I guess my entry-level positions, again, are what I said. I need people who are smart. I need people who are flexible. It's great if they have it's great if they have experience. It's not great if their experience leads them. I don't want people to be too bound by their previous experience. I like people, in terms of learning, in terms of training, because everything we do violates it doesn't violate everything, but all the rules we have turn out to be very informal. And so we have to be flexible enough to say that what you've learned in the past may not be present. Past performance is no indication of future performance with your clients. So if you bring to the table the same thinking, you sometimes run into problems when the situation changes.
I hope everyone wrote down the three important areas. One is production, writing, and design. So moving on to Gautami. Gautami, you were a DMDL student. So from that standpoint, can you share your experience with this program and how did it help you in landing a job?
So when I was in the program, I went full-time, and I was primarily within the DMDL program, and that time it was called ECT. But I also knew that I wanted to be in workplace education because I brought a little bit of background from workplace education to the program. So I did take a couple classes in the business education program. So I took about 3 or 4 classes from there. And the beauty about this program is you can really do whatever you want to do with it. And I kind of do wish that I had branched out a little more and taking some classes in like ATP, more of design, but that's pretty much what I had the bandwidth to do when I was at the program. And I did 2 internships while I was here. One was with Micah, and the other was in Bumble and Bumble, which was being an instructional designer for like the beauty industry. And one of our professors here at that time, I told him, like, why would I take an internship in the beauty industry? Like, that doesn't have much to do with me. And he was like, challenge yourself. Like, you should, like, go try something different. And it was almost like high-end fashion. And I was so out of place for, like, 4 months, but it was a fantastic experience. And really through the internships, because I'm also international, it was getting a feel for what a workplace environment in the US feels like. And that way it was really useful. And as far as landing my first job after the program goes, it wasn't directly through here, but I did like meet a lot of people and just like get to like just place myself we didn't have great presentations like this. It took me about like 2 or 3 years to like figure all of that out. But that's what this program helped me do. And I just like applied for positions in my last semester, and something clicked, and I just went on from there. And yeah, I guess it's a combination of like saying yes to like what comes your way, and also trying really hard. So.
The struggle is real, but you made it, right? So, thank you for sharing your experience and your journey. Is there one thing that you would have done differently in this program?
What I have done differently? And all the difficult questions. I don't know, just like I just said, I kind of wish I'd like branched out a little more, because I did like, I want to say like 60 to 70% like theory classes, one because of the required classes, and then the classes that I picked outside of the program were also like paper heavy. And there were like so many wonderful design classes that I could have taken more in the games for learning classes and then narrative classes, which I didn't get a chance to. So it really helps to like sit down and think about the big picture when you're picking your classes. Because at that time it feels like a fixed range of options, but you can really do whatever you want to do. Also my thesis. That's one thing that I'd done a little bit differently, because I started thinking about it in my last semester. Like the first day of class is when I like started figuring out what I wanted to do for my thesis. And by the time I had a vague idea of which direction I wanted to go, I was like 2 months into the semester, and it was crazy after that. And your thesis should be, considering the amount of time and work that you put into it, it should really be your passion project. So it really helps to like start thinking about it now through the course of all these semesters before you land in the final semester when you do it, whether it be like a design thesis or a paper. And that's pretty much what I can think. And also the portfolio that you mentioned. Whoever said that is like a very wise person, because I don't know about the amount of work experience that you guys bring when you'll be applying for jobs after you've graduated. But if you don't have that much of real world experience, your portfolio is like all that's going to speak for you. Because when you go in for your interviews, it's like a chicken and egg story, right? Like you don't have the experience, we're looking for someone more experience, and then, but how are you going to get it if you don't hire me? So, like, we do so much great work in the program, but just taking some time to synthesize it in like one place that you can show for, it really goes a long way.
I would second that. I would think the portfolio is your most important qualifier.
Great tips. One last question to you, Josh. Same like got me, what is one tip that you could share with everyone we should be mindful of?
I think you've shared a lot of really good advice. I think if I could second the idea that building your portfolio is a really important tool because it's what speaks for you, and also practicing. I guess this is another thing that I think is useful in presentation of self as well as in presentations, which is people don't rehearse enough. So I would strongly encourage before your first interview, before your second interview, before your third interview, before any important experience, that you not only give yourself the time to think about it, not only give yourself the time to do it, but give yourself the time and plan it if you can to actually rehearse what you're going to say. And if you had to trade perfection of content over a good presentation, here's a tip that my lead coach always says. I said, and we talk about major corporate presentations, give me the presentation 2 days before you're presenting before 10,000 people, and you finish it 10 minutes before and make it perfect. And I guarantee you, when I give that presentation, even though it's not quite perfect, people will respond to it much better than you because I will have had the time to rehearse it. So if I would just say, those would be the two tips that I would give.
Those are some great tips, and thank you. We should definitely keep this in mind. Practice before you go for interviews, right? So thank you, Josh and Gautami. Now I'll open this to the class. Any questions? Does anyone have any questions? Yeah. Sarita is just helping us go around.
Yeah, I'll be hosting the Q&A session. Anyone has any questions? I'll bring the mic to you.
But I guess this is a bit for Josh, because I know you mentioned that your company is working sort of on the outside, looking into other companies. When it comes down to the research portion of trying to address the problem within that other company, is that information something that they should bring to you, or is this like an in-house that you have of a group division that sort of goes in and investigates what needs to be done?
That's a really good question. Generally speaking, there's a residual industry knowledge that we have, and a residual knowledge of how things work, and both specific to an industry and in general. But we rely on a discovery process that depends a lot on SMEs inside a company, for obvious reasons, because we can't be expert to have all expertise. There are some support companies that, in fact, yeah, again, depending on what the learning process is, for, let's just stay with, again, the most heavily regulated industries are most likely to have small companies that do this. So there are a lot of relatively small pharmaceutical companies that are, in fact, have 15 or 20 PhDs in neurology or cancer or dermatology or you name it, and they can, in fact, bring their own expertise. Also, in safety, there are fewer in, the most heavily regulated industries are and the ones that have the largely, you generally look for, if you're looking for a company, you want to see the percentage of their payroll that's devoted to training. And generally speaking, the last numbers I saw, the percentage of global payroll in the United States to training is going down, which is because we love education so much in this country, as you may know from outside observation beyond the university, is 3 to 5% of payroll. Pharmaceutical companies tend to be 5 to 7% of payroll. Nuclear power companies, people who are doing high-end chip manufacturing, people with really, really strong industrial needs, probably go 7, 8, 9, 10, 11% of payroll. Those are highly, highly technical training where you have to be essentially you need the same training as the person doing the job to do it, to be able to get it right, and you have to, so those are all different processes. But I think, so again, there's no one right answer. And then the question is, after a certain point, for example, we've been working, when you work with a company for 2 or 3 or 4 years, then you actually have the training in-house, and you become, in a sense, institutional memory for your clients. And I've had clients where, in fact, we are the people who know their business, and they come to us to remind them of different kinds of things. Not everything, of course, but within context. But typically speaking, we rely on the people we work with to give us the content. We manage it. We simplify it. We help them shape it. We give them the outcome they need, and they give us the raw material.
Thank you.
My question is to Gautami. You mentioned somewhere when you do the trainings and everything, after that you send over the data to the analytics team. So what is the quality of data that you send, and what are the reports? What kind of reports do you get? What insights do you get after the analysis of data? And how does it help you to improve the further sessions and your work?
So I only pull the data, but we have a business intelligence team that serves all of the company, but they also have a way to create logics that helps pull for the information we need. So before I start the training, or as I'm creating the outlines, I call out the metrics that I want, and I'll take it to that team, and they'll tell me what they can readily just take for me, and for which logics need to be built, and depending on how crucial the project is, they'll build it for us, which is like more work for them. But after they do that, it's basically running, and I just have to like go in once or twice a week to like see how adoption is going. And what we do with the data is like really up to me. So sometimes it's about the training. Sometimes if we don't see any difference before and after the training, we know that it's that didn't work, or sometimes it could be like other organizational things. So we try to like take it back to that.
What are some of the metrics which you decide on before the training?
So, for example, say we have customers calling in to cancel. We try to like see if the customer service agent was actually able to like save that customer, and if they were able to like stop them from canceling. And one of the things that I'm doing right now is just asking customers to like just give the product a shot before they really want to cancel. So we want the agents to like push out the cancellation date, and it is a really simple logic for the data analytics team to like build out, and we're seeing it, and we're seeing that we're not doing that at all. And this is an initiative that's been in the company for a really long time. So we would ask them to like build something out like that for us. And if we had all the resources we could, because this is a shared resource, we need to kind of like wait in line to get the bandwidth of that team. And we have considered like hiring an internal like data analytics person for us, and where the learning and development team is only about 7 people. And we can't like justify the resource just yet, but when we know that, and a lot of large organizations have like a learning analytics person, but we don't at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Hi, thanks for your presentation so far. As students, do you recommend there's any professional organisations we join to understand industry trends?
Could you repeat that question?
Oh, sorry, Australian accent, sorry. As students, are there any professional organisations you recommend that we join to understand industry trends?
So I was part of a couple of organizations when I was a student, and it kind of did help me like understand what folks are talking about, so that I'm not like caught off guard. Like for the longest time, I didn't know what nano learning was, and people kept referring to it as like nano. And I worked for a company that primarily dealt with like micro learning. That's pretty much what I did for like 2 or 3 years, and I had like no idea what nano was. And I actually had to like come out and ask someone like, what is this nano you're talking about? So it just helps when you read those papers and you like read what other people are talking about, you kind of like get into the buzz. So I was part of ATD, which was ASTD before, and they also have a really robust job portal, and they come out with pretty good like annual, or I want to say biannual reports. eLearning Guild is one more thing that I'm a member of, and I'm going to the conference that they have in Las Vegas next week. And if you're considering like workplace education, that's a good one to be on. Other than the ISPI is one more. Is that your question? Like these kind of professional associations? Yeah.
Yes, it is. And you brought up my backup question, which is like, do you recommend attending those conferences?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of it depends on like where in your career and what you're trying to do. But I'm going for like purely like professional development reasons, just to like see what I can pick up. And I was there for like the last 2 years. It's huge, and as long as you have like a specific goal about like what you want to like get out of that conference and what you want to come out with, it's really great. And it's also great for like networking, and like we're actually our whole recruiting team is going out there hoping to like fill in like a lot of positions. So it's also like a great spot if you're looking to like get into the industry. Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
would support everything she said. I mean, ADT is the largest group, so it has the broadest wings, and so they have a huge, they're very, very broadly based resource. So whatever particular industry you're in, they tend to have something that matches it. And they also have, I believe, student memberships that are not too pricey. And the meetings are the place in contemporary business world where personal interactions happen. So so all of the things that you mentioned are very much the reason meetings exist. So that's, I think, it's a good thing to at least go. You can see what it is. Some of the conventions are huge, and so having a focus is really important. Occasionally, you might find a company you're targeting and ask if they'll have a booth, and then ask, and then go up and you can actually start to track a company you want by paying enough attention to them to see where they are, and then you can have a more personal connection with the company you might be looking for. It doesn't necessarily get you a job, but it certainly, if they're recruiting, put you on their radar.
More questions?
Thank you.
Hi. My question is to both of you, but in relation to something that Gautami said, you said that at your current job, you have to kind of see a lot of projects through from the start to the finish. So how do you kind of like prepare for something like that, where you're doing not just your job, but also like you have to have a fair idea of the other things that are going on? So how do you just sort of prepare for that kind of a situation?
So I wish I had a sophisticated answer to that, but I only have to like sit down and talk with people all the time. So I'll go out to the product team, like sit with them and understand like what the launch is about, what they're trying to do. Go sit down with the marketing team and like see why we angle the product in that way and why we're going for that. And a lot of times I also try to like listen to our calls. Like I spend sometimes even 2 or 3 hours in a day just listening to the calls to like see where our customer service reps are like coming from. So it's a lot about, especially in this setting, it's a lot about like sitting down and talking to people and understanding from them. But it's also different. A company like Grovo, my last job that I had, we were a learning company and we were creating training that went into a library and also for specific clients. And in that case, we used to just find subject matter experts to talk to. They could be university professors, like senior leadership in organizations. And I also did a lot of my own personal research, just books. I got like 2 or 3 days in my work week to actually just sit and read books. So all kinds of things for that. Yeah.
I would just say you're hearing a model of a good instructional program right here. If you wanted to know how to do something well, you need to know it from soup to nuts. You can't segment out, I'm only going to talk about this piece if it's a whole product. So in fact, as somebody who teaches something, you have to know it well enough to know it in all its context. I think we just heard a very good explanation of what it takes to do that.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions?
So one of the readings for this week was looking at performance support as a trend, and I think it has a little bit to do with like the idea of push versus pull learning. I mean, with the internet, we know knowledge is everywhere, and simultaneously we have a lot of technologies, chatbots, augmented reality, things that are kind of just-in-time performance supports that could, and even very simple technologies, right, that make information instantly accessible when you need it. So I'm curious if you've seen shifts in how you approach learning and training that incorporate more just-in-time learning, knowledge bases, et cetera, that have shifted you from like upfront kind of heavy-duty training to more just-in-time support.
over a rather long arc here. So the first large training project I did was a pharmaceutical launch, again, for Pfizer. I walked into a situation where they had about 3,000 people in 6 rooms of, I guess, 2,400 people, 6 rooms of 400 people each, being given 6 hours of lectures. Okay, and that was the standard that multinational pharmaceutical companies did for launch training as of circa 1999. So you already know how far you've moved from there. So let's, but again, it's all episodic. I think that the biggest issue that that we often find in terms of what corporate intentionality is, and what they would like to see, and what needs to happen, is that adult learning is voluntary. It's not mandatory, even if you put a mandatory title on it. So it has to be meaningful to the person taking it, and it has to be meaningful to the person taking it in that they can see the value in the process. And it almost doesn't matter what the modality is, what the vehicle is. I think there's a lot of moving back and forth about what vehicles are, and I think there's, as you can imagine, in anything over time, there are trends and things get popular and then they stop being so popular. But what remains consistent is if you're in school, if you're in primary school in the United States at least, there is a requirement to be there. In the final analysis, they will put you in jail if you don't go to school. Doesn't often happen, but as an adult, that's completely off the table. You choose to learn, you choose to engage. As a person providing learning, you have to keep in mind that what's really critical is that the material you're giving is valuable to the user, and that the learner will be able to take what you're providing for them and take advantage of it in ways that are evident enough to them that you both win. That is to say, you have your larger goal of what you're trying to do, where you're trying to move, and they have their personal goal that what they're doing is not only not a waste of time so that they resent it, but it actually improves their job skill, their life skill, or some of the other material that they have to do. So that's, I think, the recognition of that is a part of what's driving the pull learning, part of what's driving the attention span, because you've moved, people have stopped insisting on, as you mentioned earlier in the report, a top-down approach where some central authority will define for a series of end users what the actual experience they want to have is. But at the same time, a lot of times in my practical experience, I see these tools being used the same way. They're central. They may be small, they may be smaller pieces. They may be shorter pieces, but they don't have the administrative. In order to get a really competent learning management program, in order to have bite-sized information truly relevant to you, you have to have a really strong administrative commitment to tagging and defining and sorting and organizing a substantial amount of information in ways that, in fact, it can be useful in the ways that you rhetorically say you want it to be. And if absent that, you're actually recreating a minor version of, you have a learning path, it's just broken up in very small. And you have a learning path, you can do everything you want. And I'll give one more example of this. I did when Price Waterhouse became PricewaterhouseCoopers, so PricewaterhouseCoopers, the president of the new company came to my company at the time, it was a different company that I was working with then, and they came to me and they said, we've been to the Coca-Cola Museum, and there's a guy there at the Coca-Cola Museum who's done interactive learning. His name is Dana Aitchley, who's unfortunately not with us anymore, but was the pioneer of something he called digital learning. And we want to teach all of our 3,000 senior people, these are high-level managers and partners, how to have an interactive storytelling technique, how to really talk to their customers. Now remember, these are also accountants and consultants. How to talk to their customers in a way that's truly engaging and interactive. And here's Dana, and you work with Dana, and you come up with a meeting, and I'll see you in Singapore in 5 months, and we're gonna do this meeting, and we're gonna teach our group of 3,000 people how to turn this into something. So of course, the technology wasn't there. The information wasn't there, and Dana Aitchley himself is somebody who had a multi-generational family history. He had huge amounts of visual anecdata back to this before the Civil War. He had 3 generations of very interesting people he could rely on. He could stand in front of a room and sort of sort through any kind of story he wanted. PricewaterhouseCoopers tells, they want to sell people on consulting services, they want to sell people on. So they couldn't make it work, although what we did was we created an interactive plan that actually looked interactive, but it was really very carefully designed learning paths. That said, every 5 or 6 years I meet a senior person from PricewaterhouseCoopers. As recently as last year, I was at a conference with the head of creative services of PricewaterhouseCoopers, who had been there, and he and I had a 40-minute conversation about that same meeting 20 years ago. So it failed, and yet it was one of the most memorable experiences any of those people had. So what can I say?
And this is coming at like a personally relatable time for me, because at Audible we typically had a 4 to 6 week long new hire orientation program, which was like a big event. And now we're kind of taking down our new hire and we're making it all just-in-time learning, which means like when someone starts in the company, they can like start doing their job on day 3. And if they need something, they go fish for it. And we've just like placed the learning where it needs to be, and we've told them how to find it. And like he said, we've just like identified about 14 or 15 learning paths, like where they could stumble and when they're going to look for that information. And we're going to see how it works, and we're piloting that next week. And it's a big risk, like if they're not trained to, and if they're going to be facing customers in like 3 or 4 days. But we want to see how it goes. And what we found out from data analysis was whatever we were doing in new hire training, after they went back to their job, they were still looking at only the just-in-time support, and everything that we did in the classroom was just like over the head. So we were like, why are we spending 4 to 6 weeks because that's a lot of resources to spend. And this also like changed the way we recruit, because we needed to have a classroom full of people to justify a training effort. We were going out at one point in time and trying to like recruit as a group. And now that we're doing this self-paced and just in time, like we can just like look for quality people, and we don't have to like look to like have about 8 to 10 people at the same time. So we're like getting a better crop of folks who are joining the company, and we'd have to see how the training goes. Yeah.
I'm just going to borrow your mic. So thank you again, Josh and Gautami, for sharing all your tips, your advice, your sharing your experience with us. And we'll have to wind up now. But after this, if you have any questions, maybe we can talk to them personally. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.